It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode. It's always another episode of Pure Performance. Welcome to another episode, Andy. How are you doing on this another episode today?
It's great another episode. I wonder if we will start with saying this is not another episode, but it's something completely different, and you tuned in for the wrong podcast.
And now for something completely different.
How's everything going for you, Andy?
It's very good. And as I just told you in preparation, today is a special day for me. And I know there's going to be a special day coming up also for our guest in a couple of days.
I got a special day coming up for me, too.
Yeah.
Special days all over.
All over.
Yeah.
No, other than that, everything is good. It is, as of the day of the recording, early September. Summer has accidentally disappeared over the weekend here in Austria, at least. It was warm until Saturday, and then a cold front came through, and it seems that's it with the summer. Fall is here.
Kaput.
It's kaput. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we actually had a bit of a cold. We're getting cold nights now, and then here in Denver, and I looked at the weather forecast, and we're going to have a day in the 50s next week. Well, that's Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is to Celsius, because, I'm a pig-headed American who can't be bothered to learn.
Don't you have your
system.
days in your 50s every day?
I'm not that old. Come on.
Come on.
Anyway, we have a guest.
A lovely guest, actually, and I'm very happy to introduce her, even though I will keep it short because I'm pretty sure she can do it much better than I. Kayan Hales. I guess I jinxed it earlier because I'm definitely screwing up pronouncing her name. But
Andy.
I know, that's what it is. It's phenomenal having her on the podcast because I remember meeting her a couple of years ago when she was I think a guardian on site with one of our clients on the north, I think it was northeast, and sat down, explained the Dynatrace product, or helped, hopefully, explain the Dynatrace product and then helping the customer. And it was very clear to see that while she was still, I think, early in the job, it was amazing how she kind of, took the technical ideas that the product realized and then pushing it over and helping our customers implement it. And now seeing her in a management role within Dynatrace, for the Dynatrace ONE Premium team, which I think is really exciting. But now I am stopping talking about her because I'm sure she can do this even better. Hi, how are you? And maybe you want to quickly introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks, Andy. And I'll just say you almost got my name right, but you tried. So I applaud the effort. But for the audience here, my name is Kayan Hales, as Andy mentioned. I did work as a guardian at one of our accounts there in the Northeast, as he mentioned, and that actually was my first account and probably the toughest account and the best account. So yes, I am in management currently, and I do help the technical folks who report to me with their customers doing similar jobs where we're helping customers out, trying to get them to use the best monitoring practices.
And it's also cool. I'm just looking at your LinkedIn profile. You started through the PDP program at Dynatrace back in 2014.
I did PDP 319, which was the best class, no matter what anyone else says. Yes, I did start through the PDP program.
What's PDP? You got to remember, this is all inside jargon. I don't even know what that word is.
Right. Yeah. So PDP is the professional development program where they bring you in young and fresh and wide-eyed college grads, bring you in, train you in the technology that we use at Dynatrace and also in the technology that we support. And then they let you loose, send you out to the customers and to enable them to use the product successfully.
So I didn't even know we had that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think the cool thing, that's also the reason why, one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you on the call is because you have seen firsthand on site with, as you mentioned, one of the toughest accounts we had back then, and kind of really seeing what problems people actually want to solve in the performance space. Right. So today's talk is not about Dynatrace. It's not about the different teams that we have to help our customers. Well, obviously, we want to make sure that everybody understands that we have a PDP program to educate our folks, and we have a Guardian program where we send people on site. And now you're part of Dynatrace ONE, so we can talk a little bit about it. But it's really interesting to see and hear from people like you what are the real challenges that large organizations really have when they are reaching out to monitoring vendors like Dynatrace to say, hey, we need help. Because in the last couple of months, Brian and I specifically focused on cloud native. Everybody's talking about Kubernetes. It's the cool new thing. And I'm pretty sure we see this a lot, and this is where monitoring helps. But I know there's much more out there. And this is the reason why we really wanted to get you on the call and get like a little overview of what else is happening out there. What are people trying to solve? What challenges do they have as it comes to performance engineering, monitoring, alerting, and all these things that are relevant for us? So, yeah. And the question is,
definitely. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, the question is, are you up for the challenge? Can we ask you a lot of questions?
Yes, absolutely. I'm up for the challenge.
Okay. So the first question that I have for you, or the first kind of area, and I know we talked about this in preparation, is that it seems now we talk a lot about the cloud, yet a lot of people are not in the cloud yet. I think that we see a lot of organizations that are trying to move into the cloud. Cloud migration is a big topic. Now, can you fill us a little bit in on what you see out there, especially as people are moving into this new world, and what you see there where people are, getting challenged, or what problems they want to solve?
Right, definitely. Yes, I've definitely seen customers make that effort. Some customers quicker than others. We've seen some customers where they're more interested in the next shiny object. It's like, oh, yes, we have AWS. Let's just go straight there. Or, okay, now Azure has this new feature. Let's just go there. So they're kind of all over the place in a sense. And then we have other customers, or this other camp of customers, where everything's very rigid, where it's like, no, we can't change our app. No, we don't want to make any changes. Yes, we know the cloud is this great big thing, but we don't want to do it because we don't want to mess up our apps. And what I found is the customers that are more rigid, it's because they don't understand their application. So they do look to us to help them figure out what exactly is their app doing. And then the ones that are more attracted to that shiny object, it's just exactly as it is. It's like this new feature is promising to help them to do this thing. And so they just want to try it out. But we do have a customer that we've worked with recently that did a mass migration to AWS. And this customer is such a great example because they actually had a whole strategy behind the migration. So they had Dynatrace installed before that, but they had their own strategy in-house, right? A strategy that they worked out internally. So they talked about, cloud governance, how can they optimize the network, how can they leverage the support that AWS is providing for them, and make sure that they work directly with AWS in order to do that migration, so that when they bring in monitoring tools, we just serve to kind of bridge the gap between what's in the legacy environment and what's in the cloud. For example, doing that comparative analysis. So, okay, your response time is, let's say, 10 milliseconds in your legacy environment. We want it to be that or better in the cloud environment. So you want to pull out your monolithic app into those different microservices and have a strategy for that. Bring it into the cloud and make sure that the requests from the legacy into the cloud environment are lining up, and that the response time lines up that way. So I think customers that actually have a well thought out plan are definitely more successful, and they use monitoring tools to their advantage to do that comparative analysis between performance on legacy platforms and performance in the cloud.
Hey, and this is you brought up this example with monolithic applications on-premise moving to a microservice architecture in the cloud. Have you seen this always the case that people are actually really kind of replatforming and re-architecturing the app and breaking them up? Or do you also see examples where they just still do the traditional lift and shift? And I would assume that the requirement would still be the same. You want to make sure that the application runs as least as fast, if not faster, on somebody else's hardware. But do you see, maybe from this customer or others, more really the full way of re-architecturing for the cloud? Or do you also see these examples where they're just lifting and shifting?
Yep, I've definitely seen both. Going the microservices way is recommended. I think that's the best way, but we've definitely seen customers that they just want to do a one-for-one migration. So they want to take the entire monolithic app and put it in the cloud. That tends to take a long time. So I do remember at one of my very first accounts, that customer tried to do that lift and shift that you were talking about. And 2 years into the account, it still did not happen. Just because to move an entire app that is so big all at once and having so many teams involved, so many people that are interested in different performance metrics and so on. And the timing has to work out right. The change records have to be in correctly. The firewall rules have to be in place and all of that. It tends to delay things. So definitely we've seen both. But I do think going the microservices route is recommended.
Yeah, Andy, I think we saw this, or we had someone on from AWS Services on a while ago. I think that was the conversation where their whole thing was they won't even lift and shift, right? Their whole thing was like, our services are here to help you move to the cloud, but convert over to anything else but lifting and shifting your monolith. Does that ring a bell, Andy? I kind of remember that conversation.
It does, yeah.
Same point came out, like Kayan, you said, it's 2 years and it's still not quite working. And in 2 years, you could have had some or all of that converted over to something possibly more efficient, only leaving the monoliths for things that made sense. But everything else you could have done maybe more efficiently, maybe more cost effective. 2 years is just, pretty good length of time, and to still be struggling with a shift after 2 years. To just, I can see why people recommend against it, because it just seems like you just lost 2 years.
Right, and the thing is, you can still have a functional app being hybrid. You can still have portions of the app in legacy, portions in the cloud, and still be hybrid. You just have to break up the application into the logical functions, and that creates the microservices, and put those in the cloud, or make that gradual change from legacy into the cloud using microservices. And a lot of customers will actually see better performance in the cloud, just because those apps are broken up and you're able to function, or I should say, focus on that specific part of the app that may not be working.
And to say the least, if you're moving bits and pieces, you're taking small chunks at a time with lower risk. You're learning parts of the process as you're doing that. So as you get to more of it, you have so much more experience. It almost feels like the Parts Unlimited, was that the company from the Phoenix Project, the Unicorn Project, that was going on and on forever as they were trying to get it all right. It's like do a little bit here at a time, and those will work, and then you'll come back, later on and make some better tweaks to them that you learned on the last parts. But yeah, anyhow, sorry, it just really struck me when you were talking about that. It's great. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, the benefit of doing a little bit at a time is, you do get the opportunity to understand your app. Because like I mentioned before, some of our customers, they don't quite understand what their app is doing. So when you break it up into those functional bits and pieces, they actually get a good understanding of what their app is doing, and say, oh, this part of the app does this, and this part of the app is for user experience, and so on. So I do think there's that benefit there.
And I think, Brian, I think you mentioned earlier a podcast we had in the past. I remember that discussion on, I believe one of the arguments from against lift and shift was if you just lift and shift an application into the cloud, then you don't really reap the benefits. And maybe then people realize, well, why did we even lift and shift? It's not faster than before. Well, how should it be faster, right? It's just running on a different hardware stack. And I think that was also the argument of people want to have a good experience with moving to the cloud. But in order to reap the benefits of the cloud and having a good experience is that you are actually adopting to these new architectures, leveraging the elasticity of the cloud, leveraging cloud services for things that you may have built and operated in-house earlier, like a database, right? I think that was also one of the reasons why they definitely favor re-architecture and re-platforming apps as they move to the cloud. One question, though, you said you compare before and after. Were you working then closely with performance engineering teams, load testing teams that were actually able to simulate and put load on these systems, or did like simultaneously? That means you still had the old system and you had the new system in place and you were comparing, and then you gave the go when you were confident that the new system is faster? Or was it done more like you had data from the old system, you moved over to the new system, and then started comparing on production traffic and then kind of making final tweaks to the new cloud-based system?
Yep. So I'll say that what I've seen one customer do, which is separate from the one that we were talking about earlier, but what I've seen one customer do is they did a load test on one of their applications at, let's say it's Wednesday at noon, as an example.
Mhm.
Do a load test on the legacy environment. Then they do the conversion of that part of the application and do another load test on the same day at the same time, so they can get comparative data for the performance. So I've seen them do that in the lower environment first. So they may start off with the development environment. And if that looks good, if everything looks okay, then they move on to, say, the test environment or the load testing environment, and then they'll move on to production.
Mhm.
So that's the method that I've seen so far for customers migrating. And that has worked out so far. The performance metrics that they track would be obviously response time, but also failure rate. CPU consumption is another big one. And any errors or exceptions that's coming in would be those that they would typically track.
Now, moving to the cloud and being in the cloud, do you see additional data that people look at from a performance engineering or monitoring and alerting perspective? Like, are there new, new metrics, something new or different to the on-premise systems that people always ask for? Like, hey, I need to have visibility on this because otherwise I fly blind or so. Yeah.
I've actually seen it the other way, where on-prem, they're looking at so many metrics, trying to build so many reports for upper management, because at least based on what I've seen, they don't quite understand the app. So they're trying to just produce many, many different metrics and try and figure out, okay, since this metric is down, that means something is wrong, or doing it with that in that approach. Whereas when they move to the cloud, they actually focus on just the metrics that are important and be able to use that to make decisions that affect the application. So I've actually seen it the other way, where they actually end up using less metrics when they're in the cloud.
Yeah.
You know, Andy, I was just thinking with that whole, or in Kayan too, sorry, but this whole idea of moving to the cloud and changing the metrics kind of falls into the SRE pattern, where if you think about at least the Google defined SLIs and SLOs, the idea is you're not looking at things like CPU, you're not looking at things like exceptions, you're looking at uptime, response time for the end user, you're looking at what the final product is looking like to determine then if you need to take action and look at stuff in the back end. And I think the cloud, moving to these scalable architectures allows you to do that easier, because if you're on-prem in your own data center, you have limited resources. You have to, maybe rack a new server, try to fine-tune your VMs to get something out if an emergency happens. Whereas while we know we don't recommend throwing hardware at the issue in the cloud even, at least you have that scalability and you don't, it's not so as much of a scarce resource where you're looking for every little metric and every little number to indicate, oh my gosh, something might fall over and what are we going to do? Because you have a lot more options. Obviously, the best option is then to go ahead and fix what's causing the problem. But you have, I'd say, the luxury maybe of focusing more on the end user and less on a CPU number, which makes things, in my opinion, at least gives you more of a customer-based focus.
Yeah. I would have thought from it. I would have explained it from a different perspective. Because Kayan, you said that typically people on the on-premise side don't really know what these apps are doing. So probably they've been around for a long, long time, and maybe performance wasn't that important back then, right? And nobody really thought about what's actually important. So in order to get some type of visibility, then, well, let's get everything we can, every single metric, and then we figure out which metric might tell us something, but still we collect everything because we don't know better, and it was never a requirement to actually define what's important. And I believe now, and Brian, goes definitely to your point, now when you are architecting and developing cloud-native applications, then one of the requirements is to figure out what are my SLIs and my SLOs that are important to me because they're important to the business, and maybe what handful of other metrics do I need from a technical side to get early warning indicators that something is wrong. And so instead of doing the shotgun approach of getting everything of an unknown system, because I need to figure out if case something is wrong, then I want to have all the data. I think we're moving more towards I know exactly what's important to me because we thought about this from the start, and therefore these things may get easier even because it's more well-defined.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely agree that scalability is very important, and also capacity, because, once you move into the cloud, you can put in some automation where, if the throughput or if the load is at a certain level, then you can add in another node and automatically, right? So those type of things are what customers tend to look at as well.
Very cool. So we talked. Can we go back to talked about a lot of data? I know you have in preparation. We looked at some of the things that you've been doing, and the kind of the belief of we need all the data in the world is obviously something that people may feel more safe if they have a lot of data. But I believe just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, so we have data in case we need data, but we actually don't even know what the data tells us, and who even needs that data, is obviously a problem that it's not actionable. Let's call it that way. And I believe, I know you have experienced this with some of the organizations we work with. There's just too much data, but it's not really actionable. Is there kind of a trend that you see, or is there maybe certain organizations that are better in actually defining and asking for actionable data versus others? And also, if you approach people and you find out there's just too much data, how do you make it actionable?
So I definitely have worked with customers that they just want all of the data for sure. But as we look at the different requests that's coming in, different transactions that's coming in, there really isn't a need to look at each and every single one. Right? What you want to do is identify any patterns or any trends over time. So you do that with visual reporting. So you can use dashboards or any other type of visual reporting to present that data to the forefront to say, okay, my application was performing consistently poor over a week. Or you could even look at it from a comparative analysis to say, okay, last week it was at an acceptable response time, but this week is not. So it's not necessary to grab all of the data, but it's more important to analyze the data over a period of time to identify patterns.
And when you work with these teams, do they typically know, like you mentioned the term constantly slow or acceptable performance? Does everyone have a clear definition of what metric they actually would look at to define performance and what their acceptable threshold is and the criteria? Or is this something that is not always given, that people actually know what it means to be fast?
No, people actually don't know.
Okay.
I would say most customers tend to be reactive where they're only looking at the data, even though they have all of it. They're only looking at the data when a customer or when a user actually complains. So even that, they may try to use that as a baseline, but it's not the best baseline, right? It's not the best analytics that they can do. So what we try to encourage them to do is, look at the trends, look at the patterns, and then use that as the baseline. So look at the time where you have the most traffic. Let's say, for example, if it's an e-commerce site, right? It would be Black Friday, for example. So you would look at that time where you have the most traffic and use that to measure your performance. So if your application can handle that much load, then you're fine. If your application can't handle that much load, then it's time to scale up or time to consider capacity, time to look at different ways to optimize your code in order to handle more.
Yeah. When you work with these accounts and they ask you, we need this type of dashboard, we need this type of data. I mean, I know you're advising a lot because you see you're doing this for many accounts, and I know we have a lot of different Dynatrace ONE teams that are doing this, and I'm sure you were sharing best practices. But what I would be interested in, over the last couple of years, we've talked a lot about data democratization, meaning opening up data to more people, making it easier to access, meaning giving developers data that they need, giving business, giving performance engineers, giving everyone access to the data. Now, do you see this, that the data we are capturing is actually put on dashboards, and these dashboards are then really used and circulated or made available to a large number of people and also different types of groups? Or is it still more that you are just building dashboards for, I don't know, the platform team, the performance team, but other than that, nobody gets access to that data?
Oh yeah, we've definitely have cases where we've built dashboards that's visible to everyone that's logging into Dynatrace, just to make sure that the performance of the application is visible for everyone. We definitely have some customers that would rather keep their dashboards specific to their team or specific to their group. But for the most part, we have just general dashboards that can provide insight for everyone. So we also do funnel dashboarding, where you have just one general dashboard, but then you can click in on the different components to open up like a sub dashboard or interconnected dashboards. And that has proved to be very, very useful, because you can see everything that you need in just one space. So you only have one link that you need to access with all of the metrics that may be important or relevant. And we, of course, advise on that too. And then based on your specific role or what you're interested in the company, you can drill into that specific dashboard and look at the metrics there. So some may be role-based. So we do have charts and metrics that's specific to developers versus application owners versus database guys, which would be very useful for them. So yes, we definitely do that.
And when you said you have the funnel, you said you started with saying we're building funnel dashboards. Now, when I hear funnel, I immediately think of Klaus Enzenhofer, because he always talks about e-commerce conversion funnels. In your case, I assume you talk about a funnel more like as a journey from, I have a high-level overview, and then I can either go into component A, B, C, or maybe I'm a developer and therefore I'm interested in this. Is this what you mean with funnel? Or maybe I just didn't get this right. What do you mean with funnel?
Yep, that is exactly that. So we have a overview, high-level dashboard maybe is focused on a group of applications that's tied to a specific business unit. So they would go in and they would see the different, maybe one chart per application. And then for a specific app, they can drill in and maybe look at infrastructure metrics or application metrics or performance metrics overall. And then based on what you're interested, you can drill in to infrastructure metrics. Let's say you're specifically an OS guy, you would drill into infrastructure metrics. If you're on the load test team, you want to look at performance metrics. If you are focused on user experience, you'd want to look at the application metrics. And even going further, like for example, if we pick application metrics, you can go even further into that to look at how different geographies are performing for your application, what requests are users clicking on the most. How do you know if a user actually reached the thank you page on your e-commerce site? Right, those are the things that would be more of interest to those folks.
Very cool. So that means, we're advising, or you're advising on having an overview that basically aggregates data on an application level. So that means if you have a little tile for an application, it would be something like availability metric, overall performance. Basically, is it up or not? I would assume, right, or something like that. Or does it make revenue and things? Cool. And then drill down from there. Do we share these practices outside of the Dynatrace ONE kind of group and advising customers? Is there any? I don't know. I love my blogs. I love my YouTube videos. Is there anything where we share some best practices more publicly, or is this more just for Dynatrace ONE, for customers that are reaching out to Dynatrace ONE?
I would say from our perspective, more so for customers reaching out to Dynatrace ONE, so whether they do live chat or Dynatrace ONE Premium, they would get the same best practices.
Perfect.
And of course, I know you have your blogs and so on.
Yeah. No, but it's great that you answered it that way, because that's a call to every Dynatrace customer that is out there. Please either open up your chat in Dynatrace and then reach out to Dynatrace ONE team and say, I have just heard this blog post and I heard this podcast, and we should talk about some dashboards, best practices. That's good to hear. Perfect.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Coming back to the cloud migration and the topic of re-architecturing for the cloud, as we did lift and shift, I want to touch upon a topic that, as I said earlier, Brian and I have been doing a lot of sessions or episodes on recently. The whole Kubernetes OpenShift, Cloud Foundry, the whole new container-based platforms. I do assume that we do see this a lot in our accounts, do we?
Absolutely, yes. Definitely, we initially saw a lot of Docker, but lately we've been seeing a lot more Kubernetes in our environments with the customers that we work with.
And do you see? Is there a trend towards Kubernetes on premise or running it in the cloud as a managed service? Is there a trend that you see of Kubernetes versus OpenShift or Cloud Foundry? Is there, kind of depending also on the type of organizations we work with, any kind of clear indicator? Or let's say if a customer knocks on the door and they are in healthcare, would you immediately assume or guess based on data we have from others that they are using probably OpenShift on premise? Is there something like this we see out there?
I would say for the customers that we've worked with so far, initially there was majority Docker and PCF, Pivotal Cloud Foundry. And then they would deploy using the Bash deployment or also Pivotal Web Services. But lately we have seen a shift from that into Kubernetes. Kubernetes either in any of the cloud platforms, more so than on-premise with our customers. And they also offer monitoring to customers who use Kubernetes, either through runtime or build time so that the application owners can control how they want their app to be monitored.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely more hands off,
Yeah.
where we let the application team choose what they want to monitor, but at the same time, we still help to provide the views that they need to see through dashboards,
Mm-hmm.
and most definitely help them with alerting, making sure it's being routed to the right person, especially if they're using ITSM systems.
Mm-hmm. So that means, are you then advising the application teams to, I don't know if they want to have, I don't know, pod-based monitoring or survey, like code level monitoring, and they want to get the right dashboards, that they need to put some metadata on the containers, whether it's tags or environment variables that is then triggering or allowing the right dashboards to show the data. Is this also what you advise, like how they should build their containers, or how they should tag it? Is this stuff that you do?
Yes, absolutely. So we do suggest, certain naming conventions that they should use. Definitely need to add some metadata so that we can pull in the right information to populate the tags. And then the tags really drive everything.
Mhm.
So the tags drive the management zones, which drive the alerting and the dashboarding. So yes, we definitely allow them to, or suggest to them what kind of metadata they should put on their pods.
Mm-hmm. And I remember now a discussion we had last week. Or was it this week? I don't remember. About, we have Perform coming up in February, and we're doing hot days, hands-on training days. And I believe you suggested,
Right.
let's do a hot day session on, I think you called it pre and post one agent deployment considerations, best practices around tagging and metadata, because I think this is a really important, and we all just learn about how important tagging is and what the best practices are in these very large dynamic microservice environments, correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The first thing I tell a customer as soon as they deploy the one agent, let's talk about tagging. That should be the first thing. Aside from adding in host groups, definitely,
Mm-hmm.
because tagging is really what's going to drive everything else. And it's really important to make sure that those are auto tags,
Mm-hmm.
because no one wants to spend
Mm-hmm.
hours creating manual tags. We want them to be auto tags, and we also want them to be relevant, right? We want to make sure tags are going to drive who needs to get alerted, who needs to see the views, what kind of views we need to create. We also suggest creating specific tags for blue-green deployments as well,
Mm-hmm.
so that there's no confusion about what's active and what's passive.
Mm-hmm.
So tagging is crucial,
Yeah.
and there's best practices that we suggest for tagging your infrastructure versus tagging your application services versus tagging your application in terms of real user monitoring, because all of that does play a part in the alerting. The alerting piece is incredibly important, so it's very important to tag your applications appropriately.
Kane, it almost sounds like what you're saying is that monitoring shouldn't be an afterthought, but something that should be built in from the ground up, right? And I'm saying this kind of with a wry smile on my face, because this is the kind of stuff that we all understand, and that besides hearing from you, we hear from a lot of people that this is something you don't just, we're going to buy a tool and toss it on. Even if you're using Prometheus, no matter what you're using, right? You have to plan these things properly to really get the benefit out of it. I mean, you're talking about tagging right now, right? All the cloud providers have tags, AWS tags, the Azure tags, the GCP tags. Tags are everywhere. Setting up for monitoring so that you could leverage these things is so critical. And I'm really glad you're bringing up this point, because it's just driving home the concept that, don't just, the old-fashioned style, this is what going back years to when I was first starting, right, of get a monitoring tool, turn it on, you have 5 servers, you can handle everything. Nowadays you can't. There's no way to know what's what. So this has to be baked in early, has to become part of the best practices. It has to become part of the thought process before you even start moving, right? And do you find on engagements as you're planning those shifts into the cloud, whether it's a lift and shift or migrating to, Kubernetes or whatever it might be, are you all participating or finding people asking advice at the planning phases on how we're going to bake good monitoring into this at that point? Or does that still coming in a little bit later, but the successful ones are at least doing it before they go live? What's your experience with that?
The successful ones definitely are the ones doing it before they go live, because we have had some customers where they go live with their application, they want to add monitoring afterwards, and then based on the results of the monitoring, they find that they need to re-architect their application all over again. So
Oh,
it's
geez.
you do save a lot of time when you bake in monitoring from the very beginning, right? As when you're setting up your app, you're thinking about, okay, how is this application name even going to show up in the tool? How should I name it appropriately? And how should I label my entities appropriately so that it shows up the way you want it in the tool so that you don't end up doing a lot of configuration after the fact. Um, so naming conventions are really important. And just going back to tagging for a second, it's a case where everything needs to be tagged. So everything needs to have a label. Otherwise, it gets lost in the wind, right? Can you imagine you have 5 blank pieces of paper? Let's imagine that the blank pieces of paper are servers, and you have no idea what each server does because you didn't label it. And humans, we forget. So it's very important that we label things appropriately so that we can come back and say, yes, this is what this does. So this is who it needs to go to. This is the person who's interested in this because of the label.
And I would further suggest too that even if you're not moving to one of these complicated systems, let's say you still have more of a legacy, or for whatever reasons a 3-tier, or that 5-server setup I was mentioning, it's still a good idea to do these labeling as just to start practicing for when and if you do these migrations. You'll have that sort of ingrained, and it's if people can kind of keep track of a small system, but getting those practices and making it a habit early is a good thing, I think.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree with that.
So big lesson learned for everyone. It's about organizing the data, right? In the end, you can collect. Data collection is easy. There's so many tools out there that you can use, but it's about thinking, how do you organize the data? And the organization happens through metadata, through tags. And is there, Brian, you mentioned AWS tags and so on. Are there best practices from a metadata and tagging perspective of these platforms like AWS, Kubernetes, OpenShift, and so on, that have been kind of established as a standard? Do you see this, that maybe we can all kind of learn about, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time? Or maybe not that every vendor has to come up with their best practices, but maybe there's something more, maybe something has already been defined somewhere. I don't know. I think in Kubernetes, there's at least some annotations that are kind of not de facto, but quasi-standard. But is there anything more that you see, any type of standards that are evolving around this?
So definitely, I would say bringing in the tags that's already available in those platforms. So with Dynatrace, we can definitely do that, as well as making sure that you set you set your metadata or your properties, environment properties, on the application itself, because all of that will be automatically imported, and then we can make use of the data that's already there, as opposed to having to go back and then reconfigure in the UI, or in the Dynatrace UI, or in the monitoring UI. It's best to just make sure that everything is configured on the app, so that if there are any changes, that will automatically be imported. So that goes for metadata, for environment variables, properties, process properties, I should say, as well as any tagging that's done on the cloud platform itself.
Very cool. Just a reminder for everyone that is listening, right? I mean, these are obviously a lot of best practices that we have. And I want to highlight again for folks that are interested in learning more about this and also want to do it hands-on. The Perform 2021 is coming up virtual, but we also have hands-on training days, and that's going to be a hot day session dedicated to all of these tagging management zones and all that stuff. So definitely a shout out to that session in case you're interested in. I would like to talk about one more thing, or actually kind of figure out if there is one more thing to talk about, but I believe there is. Now, we talked about cloud migration. We talked about Kubernetes and the new cloud native world and the platform world. We talked about a lot of data, making it actionable. But we talked a lot about kind of these new technologies. What else is out there? I mean, I'm pretty sure you see also other systems that may not come to mind these days if you Google observability, which is the kind of the hype word these days. Are there a lot of other systems that you see large enterprises especially asking for to get visibility in from a monitoring perspective?
I would say Citrix is a big one that enterprises are asking for visibility into right now. But we do have monitoring for Citrix where we can do that through what we call an extension. But the benefit of monitoring Citrix is that we can provide a lot of metrics that will help to understand what exactly is going on with Citrix, what exactly you should be paying attention to. So for example, we could look at database transactions, we can look at active sessions, we can look at app sessions, latency, and so on, specifically for Citrix. So that's definitely been a big ask from enterprises, and then we definitely have that capability.
So Citrix, obviously, big technology for large enterprises. Is this mainly around? Again, I know Citrix, but mainly through Nestor, but we typically talk about other things with Nestor on the podcast and on webinars and on blogs. But in this case, Citrix is a lot about desktop virtualization, I would assume, right? So it's really about enabling the employees of an organization to really work efficiently with the virtualized applications and virtualized desktops, correct?
That is correct. Yep. So we could do Citrix virtual apps or Citrix Zen app, Citrix Zen desktop, all of those options.
Very cool.
Andy, I hope we don't have to give Nestor another pair of shoes because you brought him up.
It just comes to mind whenever the word Citrix comes up, obviously, right? It's just the way it is. Yeah.
If you're listening, we love you, Nestor.
I'm pretty sure he gets his next pair of sneakers anyway, because I'm pretty sure once we're all back to being on stage again at some point after COVID, he will be on stage again. And even I think speakers that do virtual engagements, I'm pretty sure we'll get sneakers too. Sneakers for speakers, that's the program. To kind of round this up, so it's interesting for me as a confirmation, right? It's not only the hot, cool new thing that is important, but it's also these technologies that we may sometimes forget because we always talk about Kubernetes. Citrix is one of those. I know do we see a lot of SAP out there? Because I know we have SAP support too.
Yes, definitely we see SAP. Another big one that came to mind is F5 and IBM. IBM MQ is another big one. So definitely those technologies where it's probably not as popular as your typical Java or .NET. We definitely see those where big customers are asking for support for these technologies.
Very cool. I'm pretty sure we could probably talk a lot about best practices and other things now, technologies. But overall, for me, this was extremely insightful, and especially your scenarios, we talked about earlier with the cloud migration. I think I found this really fascinating because we still, I think, are just in the beginning of people migrating to the cloud and knowing that those that actually have good planning and not just do lift and shift, but do real re-platforming are the ones that tend to be more successful. It's great to hear, and it's also great to hear that we have a strong Dynatrace ONE team that supports and consults our customers in how to use Dynatrace for pre, post, and also I think during the migration. That's awesome. Is there anything else we are missing? Is there anything we want to get out to people that are listening? They may or may not be Dynatrace customers. So anything from a monitoring side, is there anything where you say, well, I wish more people that look into monitoring, that look into performance engineering, they would know about this, so it will be easier for us? I don't know if something comes to mind.
That's a good question. Let me think about that for a second.
Because there might be, maybe you always run into similar issues that, I don't know, maybe it's not the right people that are actually interested in performance, or is it the big challenge to actually sit down and figure out what is actually important, what needs to be monitored? Nobody really have given it enough thought on what it really is that they want to get out of monitoring besides big dashboards.
Right. I would say I do wish that customers would take the time to understand the application. And I know at customer sites you have for some customers you have a large turnover, so people are going in and out. So the folks that know are leaving, and new folks coming in, they probably didn't get the correct training or so on. But I do think that customers should take the time to really understand the apps and also take the time to really consider the alerting strategy. I do think that's very important. And just like we talked about tags earlier, that's driven by tags as well. But to think about when something happens in Dynatrace or when Dynatrace picks up a problem, who exactly should it go to? It has to go to the person that can actually take action on the problem. So definitely alerting strategy and understanding the application are two big things that I want customers to take away.
Very cool. Yeah, that's great advice. Brian, is there anything from your end?
No, I got mine in during the show. You know, something pops in my head. I interrupt everyone and jump in. But I think there's a lot of really cool and interesting things that were talked about today, and thank you, Kayan, for bringing them all up. And I really just, in the beginning, you had. I got to drop that because I lost the thought. So I'll go with another one. I really like, how it was very apparent by what you discussed, the importance of preparing and planning for your monitoring. No matter what kind of monitoring you're doing, what tools you're using. Of course, we'd love you to use Dynatrace, but all of these tools, all the modern tooling, requires the tags, requires organization, requires planning.
Do it now.
How you're going to prepare or how you're going to monitor what, even as you're talking about how you're going to route it to the right teams. Well, tags, all these things feed into that. So it's not something that should be thought of as an afterthought. We're seeing more and more, and Andy and I, you and I have seen this for since all the years we've been working in performance, the rise of the importance of performance, from performance being an afterthought, from performance testing being that thing that those people do and they just hand us some numbers and they don't know what they're doing anyway, and to it becoming more and more and more centrally focused. And it's just really great to see that all happening and really being taken seriously, especially because of how critical of a role it plays in these modern environments where, you have the scalability options, you have infrastructure at your fingertips, but as we know, if you just throw hardware at it again, you have the same problem of costing more money, and it's so much easier to spend money in the cloud without knowing it than on-prem. So huge piece of it. And Kay, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And I think it's also your experience of going through that program and now being in management is pretty awesome. That's a great accomplishment on your part. So congratulations to you for just being awesome.
Thank you. And it was really a pleasure to be here.
Very cool.
Andy, do you have any, are we summoning the summarator today?
Sure, we can, but
we don't have to.
But I'll keep it short because I think I already reiterated to most of the things. But Kayan, typically at the end, I kind of summarize what I learned.
Okay.
And I think it comes down what we just said, right? It's very important that people understand that monitoring is critical, but more important is that they understand what to monitor, how to organize the data. Also, who is the beneficiary of the monitoring data? Who should be alerted? Who should get what data at which time, and what level of data do we actually need? I also really liked the fact that we are seeing these cloud migrations, as I just said, and helping people into these new platforms like Kubernetes or OpenShift. But that we, on the other hand, see that this is a diverse world we live in from a technology perspective, as well as with a lot of other things in life, and that we still see a lot of customers that are monitoring their Citrix environments and that are monitoring their SAP, their F5s, their MQs, and so on. So it's really important that we think of monitoring holistically across the whole organization, because not today, not tomorrow, and not in 3 years will you just have microservices in Kubernetes. We will have a very diverse set of technology for a very long time. And all these pieces are very important. And so we need to figure out what are the important metrics so we can make the right decision in case something happens. And I think you did a great job in telling us that we, as an organization, have a great Dynatrace ONE team that supports our customers. We learn from them across the globe, across different verticals. And we have best practices and great teams that can apply these best practices to all the other customers. And thank you so much for doing this job. And hopefully, we'll have you back again with more stories in the near future.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Awesome. All right. Well, if anybody has any topics or anything they'd like for us to discuss, they can reach out to us at pure_DT. Kayan, do you do LinkedIn or anything that you want to get any followers you want to put out there?
Yep. I am on LinkedIn at Kayan Hales.
Kayan Hales?
Yes.
Hales, not Hayes, as Andy might spell it, right?
You got it right. Hales.
And I'll just do my own shameless self-plug. September 4th, my band, we have an EP coming out on streaming. It's a compilation of stuff that wasn't released between 2004 and 2008, the first of 3 EPs of unreleased material. So I'm excited about that. And Andy, anything that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think that's it. Well, actually, no, I have to bring up one thing because we haven't brought it up today. It's called Captain. Go to www.captain.sh. It's the hot new thing we're working on, and it would be great to have more people on that project. But that's it.
Yep, and we have Perform is going to be virtual this year. So I think there's been I don't know if there's been any releases yet. I know there's some stuff internally going on with that so far, but keep a lookout for that, people. There'll be some news coming out if it hasn't already hit the streets yet on what's going on there. And I guess everyone, you might not be able to get your unicorn, but please remember to vote.